It's very hard to see the attraction to Wayne Rooney as a manager after that Birmingham spell. It will genuinely go down as one of the worst managerial reigns in Championship history. I thought that was it for Wayne Rooney's management career in this country. I did not expect to be talking about him again 6 months after the fact.
I also think it's a last chance saloon for him in terms of getting big jobs.
You'd say any job in the country, Justin, because I don't think he'd drop down to League One level. So,
well, exactly.
Yeah, that's probably it. Hello and welcome to the Second Tier Podcast. I'm Ryan Dilks and I'm joined by the Steve Holland to my Gareth Southgate. It's Justin Peach.
Good day to you, Ryan.
And so here it is, ladies and gentlemen. After a summer of highs and lows, the Second Tier can officially declare the countdown to the new season well and truly underway. The mood across the nation may still be low after another disappointment on the international stage for the Three Lions, but never fear, the return of the greatest league in the world is just around the corner. Justin Peach has put away his CrossFit attire, complete with short shorts and one of those sweatbands people wear around their heads. Instead, he's firing up the coffee machine and growing out his moustache in preparation for a long, hard season of stroking his upper lip hair before pulling it out in frustration at Scott Parker being Scott Parker. Ryan Dilks, on the other hand, is still practicing mindfulness after his summer pilgrimage to Japan. However, he's taken off the kimono and other pieces of clothing which tread dangerously close to the border of cultural appropriation in preparation for his annual obsession with a particular football club who will relentlessly get praised all season, no matter what they do. Overall, it's promising to be one of the most exciting seasons in Championship history, and your pals at the Second Tier are here to help you count down to the start of the new season, because Ryan Dilks and Justin Peach officially declare that countdown to start now. This is it, Justin.
Good day to you, Ryan. I don't know what to say.
Do you like that intro? I thought it was a good summary to really, be the person who cuts the ribbon on the new season.
Yeah, it was a call to arms more than a summary, I would say. It was. It surprised me on occasion, but it got me fired up mostly, but also intrigued by a lot of things. Summer pilgrimages, if that's how you say it. But growing my moustache purely for the football season, it's not. It's an all-round thing. I commit to the moustache game. It's got me fired up. It has. I was perplexed. I was surprised. I was almost. I'm lost for words, but I'm gathering them once again to get going, get firing, get excited.
Well, it's good to hear, Justin. That is really good to hear. Welcome to the number one Championship podcast, the Second Tier. Thank you for joining us wherever you are. And today we are ranking all the managers in the Championship. So a reminder for anyone who's new around here, we make this the same way we make any of our lists, like this. Justin makes his lists, I make my list, and we merge them into one, which is what we're about to present to you. Now, this is crucial. I cannot emphasize this point enough. We base this list on how much we would want that manager at our club, because it's the only way you can feasibly make this list, isn't it, Justin? How else can you compare Daniel Farke to Regis Labrie? This is how we make this list each and every year.
Exactly. It's like comparing Pep Guardiola to Neil Warnock. If you want them in charge of your football club, that's the only way you can compare them, because I would 100% have Neil Warnock in charge of my football club over Pep Guardiola. Guardiola is objectively the better manager. He's won more. He's done more at the top of the game. But if he's not going to play Route 1 football in charge of, I've got 9 target men at my football club. I want Neil Warnock. I don't want Pep. So this is how we're ranking. I don't know if I've helped the situation or not.
No, I feel like you've really muddied the waters there by saying that. But what we're doing is by essentially saying we're in charge of a Championship club. We're making this list based on who would be top of our to get list, essentially. So yes, this list is ranking how much we would want each Championship manager at our club. It's our 3rd year doing this now, Justin. Always gets a mixed response, but that's fine. That's what we're here for. But safe to say, worked out pretty well last year with Kieran McKenna top, didn't it? Which got a lot of criticism at the time, but proved to be absolutely spot on, didn't it?
Yeah, and obviously we put Enzo Maresco in 20th, if I recall, and he turned out to be a snake. So it's paid off. It's all paid off.
I'm not sure he was that far down, but you had him quite far down compared
I had
to
him
me.
20th because I knew he was a snake. Yeah.
We met somewhere in the middle, which pretty much sums everything up, I suppose, based off of how things have gone since then. But it's also worth mentioning 11 of the 12 managers we had in the bottom half of our list last year would go on to be sacked, Justin. Now, not saying that's going to happen to the managers coming up in this episode, but it just gives a bit more credence to the accuracy of this list and shows that our opinion matters in this very matter, Justin. And we may as well crack on then, shall we, Peachy? Let's get things underway with the manager we have down in 24th on this list. Justin, who is the manager you would least like to have at your club based on this list?
Yeah, the first manager coming out of our mouths is Wayne Rooney. He's the least manager we'd like to have at our football clubs. I think it's quite an easy one because of the recency bias surrounding Wayne Rooney. That spell at Birmingham was a disaster. But look, if you look at it on paper, he's played a role in two teams being relegated from the Championship. That is the headline surrounding a Wayne Rooney appointment. But if you dig a little bit deeper, Derby style of play, last one of his jobs in the Championship. It was a brainchild of Liam Senior. It obviously all went wrong at Birmingham City, and he could be a success at Plymouth. But I think that Rooney glamour and shine has rubbed off because of how things transpired at Birmingham City.
Yeah, it's very much rubbed off, and it's just
it's that Champions League trophy that Sergio Ramos dropped under the bus.
There you go. That's the simile I was looking for. It's very hard to see the attraction to Wayne Rooney as a manager after that Birmingham spell, because it will genuinely go down as one of the worst managerial reigns in Championship history. I mean, how many managers can say they've taken a club challenging for the playoffs and turned them into a relegation side in a matter of weeks? It's pretty good going, really, isn't it? And I thought that was it for Wayne Rooney's management career in this country. I really, really did. I did not expect to be talking about him again 6 months after the fact, but here we are, Justin.
Do you think he could revive his career at Plymouth? Because I think Plymouth's a very good club to be able to do it.
I mean, he's definitely got the opportunity, because I agree, it's a very good place to do it. It's just very surprising that he's been given this opportunity based off how everything went. And that's why I'm still sat here right now thinking it's a rather puzzling appointment by Plymouth, who just seem infatuated with appointing Scousers.
That's the key thing, isn't it?
It's the only reason I can come up with for them making this appointment. Their last 5 managers have been Scouse, despite Plymouth being almost as far away from Liverpool as you can get. It's very bizarre. But look, Rooney is one of the greatest footballers this country has ever produced. His managerial career, he did a very good job at Derby, in fairness to him, but there were very unusual circumstances which, in a strange way, helped him. He's coming off the back of, as we say, a disastrous spell at Birmingham. Has spent a lot of time since then trying to forge a boxing career against YouTubers. And now he's at Plymouth Argyle. It's just bizarre, Justin.
It is bizarre, but I think this is a good opportunity for him. It's almost I also think it's the last chance saloon for him in terms of getting big jobs, i.e. top 2 division.
You'd say any job in the country, Justin, because I don't think he'd drop down to League One level. So,
well, exactly.
Yeah, that's probably it.
Yeah, so Plymouth does represent the last chance saloon. That being said, I do want him to succeed. I really do want him to succeed, because I don't think he's gone down the Frank Lampard route. Getting favours in wherever he needs them. Wayne Rooney cut his cloth at a really tough Derby job, then went to America, tried it there as well, didn't quite work out, and then went to Birmingham and it was a disaster. Now he's gone to Plymouth, which, limited resources, all being said, but it's a young squad that has got a lot of potential. So I think it's a good opportunity for him. I also think his PR has improved a wee bit for me from the Euros. I really enjoyed his punditry at the Euros. He said a lot of things that resonated quite highly with me.
You say that.
Maybe.
I saw an article literally earlier today which said he was voted the worst pundit at the Euros. So it depends who you ask.
Ahead of Rio Ferdinand. My goodness.
Yeah, that's saying something. Obviously he's got this opportunity. It's a great opportunity for him. Will he make the most of it? I don't know. You've got to ask the question, have Plymouth just appointed him because he's a big name? Plymouth's owner has said that's not the case, but put it this way, I'm not sure Paul Warne would be getting the Plymouth job if he had the exact same managerial career path as Rooney. So he's got a big job ahead of him, but I don't think it's a massive disgrace by any means. I don't think many people could really argue with us putting him bottom of this list, Justin, based off how terrible things went at Birmingham. Having said that, I didn't actually have Wayne Rooney bottom of my list. I had the next manager who ended up eventually succeeding Wayne Rooney. That's Paul Warne at Derby County. He's 23rd on our rankings of managers in the Championship. Now look, Warne did superbly well in getting Derby back to the Championship so soon after everything they've been through. But Justin, if you're asking me which current Championship manager I would least like in charge of my club, it's hard to look past a bloke who's had 3 seasons in the Championship and been relegated each time, isn't it?
Yeah, he's the League One Guardiola, which I think is fair, but he's the Championship Alan Pardew.
Bit harsh on Pardew, really, isn't it?
I will make this point first. He's a really likeable guy. He's a really, really likeable guy. He's a very positive human being, and he really values the human aspect of football. And I think that resonates a lot with players, but also that transfers onto the fans as well, and they pick up on that positivity, which probably makes this choice of him being 23rd sound a bit harsh. But you are right. If you're judging it purely on his Championship CV, he has got the CV of a relegation specialist, hence the Pardew comment. I would make the argument as well that he should have at least delivered a playoff finish in his first League One season with Derby. I know he took over from Messina, but I think he should have at least delivered a top 6 finish. Perhaps he should have laid more of a glove on Portsmouth for the title race as well. There are limitations with his system. He seems married to 3 at the back, and as I say, his system relies solely on players' fitness. And I do worry there are tactical limitations to Paul Warne's game to really succeed in the Championship. He's still unproven. That being said, he's had more seasons in the Championship than most of the managers in this top 24.
Yeah, which is saying something, and it's gone pretty wrong every single time. As we say, three seasons in the Championship, 3 relegations. You can't argue with his record at League One. It's absolutely sublime, but making that jump up to the next level is obviously a massive concern, and whatever your feelings are on Derby next season, that has got to be a massive concern. Warne's record at this level. Now, we have got to remember that those 3 seasons were with Rotherham. Don't have the greatest of resources there by any means, but other managers have managed to do a lot more with similar resources. And then when you add in the fact that his football's not great either, is it the kind of football that would try to attract another club from in the Championship? No, definitely not. So I'm struggling to come up with many pros as to why you'd choose him over other managers in the league, Justin. Hence why he's so far down in our list, I think.
Well, that's the key thing, isn't it? You know, it's putting him
Justin,
ahead of other
you are
managers.
a Derby fan, as we all know. What pros are there?
He's a very likeable guy, but again, if you're judging it purely on the intangibles on the football, it's the 3 relegations with Rotherham, and as you rightly pointed out, some managers have come up, have done it, succeeded with similar resources or even less resources than that of Rotherham, although the budgets are small. It's just, there's no amount of positivity or bobble hats that he wears that makes him quirky that will convince me that his football can be a success in the Championship. I think they can be competitive, Derby, but look, the club the size of Derby, and this is a bit of an arrogant comment, they are a big football club. They should be doing a lot more than just trying to skirt relegation. And they should certainly be, I think the fans deserve a lot more than just fit players. And that might sound harsh, but again, if you've got a system that relies heavily on putting crosses into the box and players running around a lot, you have certain limitations as a manager, and maybe that's League One.
Yeah, he's a manager who at this stage right now, I'd be surprised if he lasted the season, I think. And we're saying this with David Clowes, the current Derby County owner, who's quite a patient bloke. But I'd still be quite surprised if Warne did last the season, I must say. Justin, let's go on to number 22. Who have we got as the 22nd manager in this list?
We've gone with Neil Harris, obviously of Millwall. Now, it depends who you support. If you're a Millwall fan, he'd be top of your list, because Neil Harris and Millwall is a match made in heaven, isn't it? It just works. He kept them up in the Championship at a canter for me. But similar to Paul Warne, I think his football has limitations. And the stats do back that up. Look, I'm not going to dwindle too much on XG, but it gives you a good idea on the balance of play. Millwall only created chances, more chances than their opponents on 4 occasions of the 13 games that Neil Harris had in charge last season. So over a 46-game season, is that enough? Is that going to be sustainable enough? Is his football sustainable enough? Is it enough to convince me to put him in charge of my football club? Unfortunately, not on this occasion.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Justin. He's hardly the most progressive manager in the Championship, is he? Even though you are right, he did fantastically well at Millwall last season. When he took over, they were 20th, ended up finishing 13th. And in fact, in the 13 games he was in charge, only Ipswich won more points than Millwall, which is ridiculous, really. And perhaps he doesn't get enough credit for the job he did last season, including from us. However, the point that you mentioned there, Justin, about the XG, I think that's definitely worth pointing out. I think it's also got to be said how much of that good form was down to managerial ability and how much of that was down to vibes. I think vibes was definitely playing a massive part here. You've got a manager coming in who's a club legend, sticking a few rockets up arses. You know, it works well. As we saw last season, but based off how his managerial career has gone over the last few years, there's reason to believe that a lot of the success from last season was down to vibes.
Yeah, and the interesting thing with Neil Harris is he has been a success with Millwall before. It just depends whether Neil Harris coming in now and Millwall being in the position they are right now, that the timing's right for Neil Harris. And as well as that, is Neil Harris has he shoehorned himself into a firefighter type managerial role where he's going to allow you to sit deep and defend deep and get you organised and get you really hard to play against? It's just whether or not, as I say, that's sustainable over a 46-game season. Can he progress that? Maybe. But from what we've seen so far, the data we have at our feet right now, it doesn't convince me enough to put him in charge of my football club. But look, if my football club's 22nd in March and I need a manager to come and put rockets with arses, I'd give Neil Harris a call.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair, Justin. Last season, he was the short-term option, wasn't he? He was there to do a job in the short term. Now they're asking him to do a job in the long term, and he did the short-term job last season. He did the firefighting in keeping Millwall up. Now you're asking that firefighter to rebuild the house, and I have my doubts over whether he's capable of doing that job, unfortunately.
Yeah. Neil Warnock he's travelled up from Devon, he's travelled up from his home in Cornwall, sorry. He's taken the Neil crown, he's taken it off his own head, and he's putting it onto Neil Harris's head. He's a firefighter, man, short term.
Warnock also was capable of doing it in the long term as well.
Yeah. I'm talking a different crown. Warnock retired that successful crown. He's now gone, look, firefighter hat. Neil,
a crown of thorns.
From one Neil to another. Here you go.
Okay, there you go. Let's go on to number 21, Justin. It's Chris Wilder at Sheffield United. Now, it must be quite a strange time for Sheffield United fans right now. We've mentioned how low the mood has been recently after an abysmal season and then several players going out the door, many long-term servants, the likes of Chris Basham, John Egan, etc. However, the mood seems to be changing there after a very encouraging set of signings. Callum O'Hare, Kiefer Moore, 2 brilliant signings, which certainly raised eyebrows across the Championship. Sam McCullum, Jamie Shackleton coming in as well. Really good signings. Annoying that O'Hare and Moore came in after our episode on Monday. But, these things happen. So that's really quite exciting. But there's still a few things holding me back from properly getting excited with Sheffield United. One of the prime things for me is Chris Wilder, Justin.
It's so intriguing as to how far his stock has fallen in years. He's gone from tactical genius with the overlapping centre halves to conspiracy theorist. Because Sandwichgate dogged him, and he's now hovering over him like a or surrounding him like a bad smell.
He's a managerial David Icke.
We can laugh about it, but it's true. It's just it's sad that his stock has fallen that far. Honestly, he was lauded as a tactical genius. Some crazy people on Twitter on occasion were saying, he could be the next England manager. But now he's...
Justin, if Gareth Southgate resigned 4 years ago, I think Wilder would genuinely be in the conversation for the England job. Whether he'd actually get it or not, I don't know. But that shows how much his stock has fallen.
Yeah, his odds would have been short. I'd say that, but
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. And you mix that with the football side of things. Sheffield United were a disaster on two separate occasions in the Premier League. You can't pin all of last season on him. Heckingbottom was in charge for a period of that, and there's the season before where they were looking like they were likely to eclipse that record points tally set by Derby all those years ago. Football's not been great tactically. I think he's been very fixed at three at the back. Middlesbrough, fell out with people above him. Watford as well. It wasn't a great spell. He's got a lot to do to improve his reputation, because, as I say, he's gone from being lauded as a Pep Guardiola type to a man who doesn't like linesmen eating sandwiches.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. You talk about how much his stock has fallen, Justin. We did this exact list 2 years ago, and he was top of that list when he was in charge at Middlesbrough.
Mad.
Which I think is the ultimate sign of how much his stock has fallen. But yeah, you're right. Since then, he's had a convincing relegation with Sheffield United since he was being linked with the England job many years ago now. A very flat spell with Middlesbrough, a bizarre 11-game spell with Watford where he just seemed to spend most of it moaning about everyone at Watford, including the players, the owners, just anyone who he'd even spoken to. And then, obviously, that relegation with Sheffield United, which was just embarrassing for all involved last season. So, has he still got what it takes to make an impact at this level, or is he a past-it manager who moans about referees eating sandwiches and just seems to fall out with everyone at every single opportunity? Unfortunately, recent evidence seems to indicate the latter, doesn't it?
Exactly. And I think the worst thing is that he doesn't do his own PR very much good either. He interviews like a man whom you didn't hold the door open for. He's just constantly scowling and just looks pissed off all the time. And I think that goes a long way, just being a little bit positive. In fact, interesting knowledge. There's a reason why Steve Cooper's never been linked with top jobs, is because that personality's never really shone through in interviews. Chris Wilder, just crack a joke, man. You might get the England job.
Not sure it's that simple, but I respect the sentiment. He gives off the impression of some bloke who you've cut up on the way to a job interview, and then the person who's doing the interview is Chris Wilder. Do you know what I mean? He's just very salty all the time. It just seems like he's constantly out to get whoever's crossed him. And unfortunately, the people who have crossed him seem to be getting the better of it over recent years. So whether he can turn things around, only time will tell. But it's certainly been a very bright start for Sheffield United. Chris Wilder's certainly got a lot of people to try and prove wrong in the meantime, though. Justin, let's go on to the manager who we have 20th in this list. Who is it?
Yes, in 20th, we've got Regis Libri of Sunderland. I think what draws me in with dear old Reggie is the reputation he's got of working with younger players. And there'll be listeners thinking, why is he above the likes of Chris Wilder and Paul Warne, who have got championship experience? And as I say, it's down to his philosophy. From my point of view, is that's why I've put him higher up than people who have had experience in the Championship already. He was at Rennes as head of academy coaching before getting the top job at Lorient, so he's had to cut his cloth accordingly. And actually, there was a super intriguing article on Opta Sport about Lorient's system under Libri, and that actually drew me in a little bit more. He wants to play deep, he wants to break quickly, and I think that's what the Sunderland side needs. It needs a fast counter-attacking team full of youngsters who are just hungry and out to get their opposition. So this might be a nice fit, looking deeper into it.
Well, the reason I've put him in the similar position to this in my list is just purely because of the unknown, Justin, because we don't know what we're going to get with Regis Libri, and that's kind of what we're approaching now with this section of the list, where it's just a lot of unknowns and we can't really put them any higher or any lower just because we don't know what they're about. We're about to find out this coming season. It is worth saying 123 days it took for Sunderland to find Regis Libri. That was the gap between Mick Beale getting sacked and Libri being appointed. A lot of names were being linked before him. I don't think he was ever at any point the first choice, but they've ended up with him, and it's going to be fascinating to see how he does. He's only had 2 seasons in senior management, despite being 48. He's certainly on the older side of managers in the Championship. Both of those seasons were in charge of Lorient in France, and he did a great job by all accounts in his first season in charge. 10th place finish in Ligue 1 without the biggest set of resources. It was pretty good going, really. Then last season, all went pretty wrong. However, he wasn't helped by Lorient selling their best players and not replacing them. I feel like his 2 seasons in management, one of them is going to be a good summary of how his time at Sunderland goes. I think it's either going to go quite well or really badly. And sat here right now, Justin, with a few weeks until the season starts, I'm really not sure which way it's going to go.
Yeah, and I guess that's the unknown, isn't it? That's why I can't put him any higher. But also, like I was saying, the reason why he's higher than some of them is because he does have a track record that is somewhat impressive and somewhat intriguing, somewhat exciting as well. I think that's just a Sunderland case, by the way, that you've just described. It can either go incredibly well or it'd be a disaster. It never just simmers for Sunderland. They either boil over or the veggies just rock hard and undercooked. It's never quite perfect or never quite right.
Veggie
I should
Libri.
say. Veggie Libri.
There you go. That's his name sorted for the season. But you are right, Justin. That does seem to be the case with Sunderland. I mean, you can easily put all of their past managers in a category of very good or very bad. And I'm fascinated to see which way Labrie ends up. But look, he does have a very good record developing young players. Some very recognisable names have come through working under Labrie. And that'll be crucial at Sunderland, who had the youngest squad in the league last season. But as we say, ultimately, he's a new manager to the Championship, so therefore he's very much in a realm of we don't know what to expect. And for the purpose of this list, it makes a lot more sense to put more recognisable names ahead of him, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the key thing with this list. It's about who we want in charge of our clubs, and ultimately, if you've got a somewhat, a fairly decent track record as well as a clear philosophy and style of play, that might get you ahead of someone who's, say, got a club relegated from the Championship 3 times.
Well, there you go then. So Reggie Labrie is very much an unknown, as is the case with our next manager in this list. At 19th, we've got Tim Walter from Hull City. Now, he was most recently in charge of Hamburg over in Germany. We'll start with the positives. He only just missed out on getting Hamburg promoted from the German second tier. They're obviously a massive club, so managing expectation there is always going to be difficult, and that's something that he very much had to deal with in his 2.5 years in charge. And in the 2.5 seasons he was there, they scored an average of 2 goals per game. He's known for playing entertaining football, so we can expect a lot of that at the KCOM next season, and that's all very exciting. However, and this is quite a big however coming up, while he only just missed out on going up, he ultimately failed in getting Hamburg promoted. And we're talking about a massive club in the German second tier, 50,000 plus coming to watch them week in, week out. They also had the biggest budget. The season before last, they spent twice as much as any other team in the German second tier, and still he didn't get them up. Walter also got a lot of criticism in Germany for not having a plan B. And his stubbornness led to him being quite a spiky character when talking to the press, according to Andy Brassel from our fellow Stack show on the continent. So I'm a bit worried about this one, Justin, particularly with the huge amount of talent that's gone out the door recently at Hull. It feels like it's quite a big job for Walter, and his track record at Hamburg certainly gives more causes for concern than it does optimism from my perspective.
I think this is one of those occasions where it's like, well, you can have your ready-made manager who you know is going to deliver at least a top half finish in Liam Rosenior, or you can roll the dice and see where it lands with Tim Walter. And that's literally what Hull have done. And it is a huge risk, but as you pointed out, style of play-wise, it does significantly differ from Rosenior. I did read that whilst Tim Walter still wants to play out from the back, there's an urge to drive the ball forward much quicker, which should excite the crowd, and of course Akinele Kali could inadvertently leave them open as well. But it's that interesting trade-off that's going to make a difference. But I think maybe, and this is an interesting question, expectations at Hamburg are high. I don't think the expectations at Hull this season are going to be that high. So Tim Walter's going to have a little bit more of a looser leash, if you like. Do you think that will help him?
Well, interested you say that, because I think expectations may not be as high from our perspective. Does Achonila Charlie, the Hull owner, also share that sentiment? I'm not completely sure, Justin, even though...
It's all his best players.
They have, but he's a man who's very ambitious, isn't he? And, well, admittedly, they've let so many players go out the door recently, it's unbelievable. it's going to be quite difficult for them to do that. I fully expect them to spend quite a lot of money before the transfer window closes, and that in itself comes along with quite a lot of expectation in itself. It's interesting what you mentioned there about the entertaining football factor. Was talking about that a second ago. He also got a lot of criticism in Germany for conceding a lot of goals, and now that Hull have lost one of the division's best centre-backs in Jacob Greaves, I'm not sure that's going to help him in that regard. But look, out of the 3 new managers who have been appointed from abroad this summer in the Championship, this is the one I'm least convinced by. And we have got to remember in all of this, this is the guy that Hull decided was the successor for Liam Mazzina, who it was such a big call to sack not too long ago. So when you're making a big call like that in sacking a promising young manager in Liam Mazzina, you've got to get the next appointment right. And from what I've read about this guy, I'm not totally sure he is.
Well, I think this is why it's a risk, isn't it? As I say, you're rolling the dice with Tim Walter. You're taking that point. You're taking a ready-made Liam Mazzina, who, as I say, got a track record of delivering at Championship level, and taking a huge risk with Tim Walter, and doing so having sold your best players and your most exciting player, Jayden Philogene, who probably would have fit the philosophy that Tim Walter was wanting to carry out, where he's wanting his teams to attack, he's wanting to play on the front foot, he's wanting players to get out and release themselves a little bit. So I think this is going to be one that is going to be the most intriguing one. Because if it pays off, it's going to pay off really, really well. But there's got to be a lot going Tim Walter's way for that to happen. Recruitment's got to start first. But again, if you're asking me to have him over others that have come into the Championship, I would pick Tim Walter, because, as I say, it's a nice risk. It's an attractive risk. It's a crazy risk, but could be a good one.
I'm not too sure. There's a reason I had him quite far down in my list, a bit further down than you, Justin. I will point that out. Yeah. Justin, we are, of course, doing our 24 to 1 in our manager rankings of who would most like in charge of our football club in the Championship. We'll have a quick break, and after that, we'll reveal 18 to 13. Welcome back to the Second Tier podcast. This is us ranking all the managers in the Championship based on how much we would want them at our club. We're now on to 18th. Justin, who have we got in 18th?
We've got Des Buckingham of Oxford. I think as a coach, I'm very excited by him. I think the only thing that's obviously going to hold him back is the experience at Championship level, but he's got such an interesting background. He's coached in New Zealand, Austria, Stoke, India, and now he's in charge of his boyhood club.
Stoke?
Yeah, he has.
Sorry, it just really caught me off guard, but carry on.
But his limited experience in the Championship, as I say, is probably holding him back from being any higher. That achievement, though, of getting Oxford into the Championship, that's massive. That's massive. So many managers have failed before him. And it could have tailed off last season as well, when Liam Manning left and took the Bristol City job. Buckingham took over in November, steadied the ship, carried on that ethos, beat the favourites Bolton in the playoff final with a pretty, I would say, a tactical masterclass in nullifying Bolton playing, if anybody watched that. So as I say, I'm really, really intrigued and excited by it, but just that experience is just holding me back.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to learn more about Des Buckingham as well. Obviously, not someone who's been at the centre of our attention, considering he's been in League One, but you are quite right. He's had a pretty crazy career, hasn't he, when you consider New Zealand to India, then League One. It's not the most well-trodden path for coaches, is it? But look, he did fantastically well in getting Oxford promoted. They were a club who had been knocking on that door for quite a while, so to actually get through the door is quite impressive on his behalf. And that achievement even saw him getting linked with the Welsh job not long ago, didn't it? Before Craig Bellamy got it. So that's all very exciting. I'm going to hold back on Buckingham for now, though. One of the reasons for that is, even though he got Oxford up, from the time Buckingham was appointed until the end of the season, they won the 14th most points in League One, which isn't very impressive at all, really, is it? It's quite surprising, actually, how poor that stat is. It was only towards the end of the season where they really picked up, and it feels like form did kind of get them over the line a bit in terms of the playoffs. So it certainly took a while for them to get going under Buckingham. But I suppose the question you've got to ask is, if Buckingham struggled for long periods in League One, how will he cope in the Championship? Because you're going to be managing a side who will be the underdogs most weeks, won't they? So I'll cautiously hold off on making a real judgment on Des Buckingham for now, because I think there's a lot of things he needs to prove, but at the same time, he still seems like a very highly rated young coach.
I think it's one of those. It's like a young player coming through. You don't want to throw everything at them because they can turn out to be an absolute dud, or they could go on to become a world beater. And it's the same with managers. Des Buckingham, it's important to hold your cards a little bit closer to your chest. This is why it's such an intriguing one and an exciting one, because if it goes well, I think Oxford can. Or I'll step too far in saying they can thrive in the Championship, but they can certainly be a team who are very, very competitive in the second tier next season. But as I say, again, if you're wanting them in charge of your club, he's a young coach. He's had experiences of different cultures. He's taken a club up from League One. He ticks a lot of boxes, more boxes than those that are below him, and that's what makes it all the more exciting for him and for us to be able to cover him. And again, emphasis on that tactical masterclass in the playoff final. So hard to get playoffs right, and Baltimore were steamrolling teams. They're such a good attacking outfit, and Oxford nullified them. They changed their own game. Changed the game plan and they nullified them. Similar to what Russell Martin did to Leeds in the playoff final for the Championship, Des Buckingham did that in League One. And I think that has to go a long way as well when thinking about this.
Yeah, certainly worth considering. I would just give an air of caution before putting Des Buckingham down as anything more than a just an exciting prospect of a manager, shall we say. Speaking of exciting prospects of managers, in 17th, we've got Tom Cleverley at Watford. Now, he was a manager we were full of praise of for the job he did in such a short time last season, weren't we? Just 9 games in charge, just 2 losses. That may not sound massively impressive, but when you consider 7 of those games were against sides who finished in the top half, including Ipswich, Leeds, Southampton and West Brom, really goes a long way to show how good a job he did in such a short period of time in what is his first spell in senior management. So he did a really good job in steadying the ship after Valou and Ishmael's sacking. Fully deserved the crack at managing them full time. However, we can't really put him any higher in this list just because we've only seen a handful of games with him in charge so far. So again, another one we've got to approach with an air of caution, but based off what we saw last season, Justin, very impressive.
It is impressive, and I think it's one of those where I'm quite hot on Tom Cleverley, and probably would have put him in the list if it wasn't for the pragmatism of knowing that he doesn't have a lot of experience. Just has a handful of games as a manager. But those handful of games, they were really impressive, and under the circumstances that other managers, more experienced managers at Watford, have failed to really thrive under in the past. You look at what happened to Chris Wilder literally a year before. Players stepped off it towards the end of the season and just weren't arsed, and Chris Wilder called it out. Whereas Tom Cleverley galvanised the place, got the players playing for him, and were picking up results. They picked up points against Leeds, West Brom, Ipswich. They were unlucky against Southampton as well. They lost in the last minute in that game, and it took a few scalps. I think he's a young manager and one that you'd want to take a chance on. He's up and coming, and I think it's a nice opportunity for him at Watford. Always, a sense of don't get too carried away because it's Watford, but I'm quite hot on Tom Cleverley. I really am.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair, Justin. He's very well liked by the players there. We heard that on numerous occasions last season. Very well liked by the fans, of course, for his service as a player. And his main job next season is going to be reuniting the club, because there seemed to be quite a fracture between the supporters and the owners in the way that the club was being run, the general direction of the club. He will be the youngest manager in the Championship next season, just 34 years old, which is incredibly young, isn't it? So it's going to be quite a task in dealing with what he's got ahead of him at such a young age. The question is, will he become the first Watford manager in 6 seasons to last an entire campaign? That's going to be the interesting one, isn't it? I hope he does. I quite fancy his chances of doing so as well, Justin.
Yeah, Ishmael was so close, wasn't he? He was so close, just literally a couple of months out. Whereas I think Watford are in a position where they obviously need to reset their playing squad. They're probably going to have to sell a few star assets as well and rebuild. It doesn't look like the Popsos are going to put in any more money to sign players, and therefore are they likely to want to keep paying managers out of their contracts? You'd expect not. So I think for Watford it'd be nice if a manager did so well that they got poached. That would be a turn for the books, wouldn't it? Even if it didn't last a season. And I think if a manager's going to do it, Tom Cleverley has got the gravitas and the in a very short space of time, he's convinced me that he's got the tactical nous to do it as well.
He's got
And
the
I think
name
that's a big-
recognition, hasn't he? So if
Well, he's
he
been a top player, hasn't he?
well, if he does very, very well next season, like surprisingly well and just confounds all expectations, then he'll certainly be attracting a lot of admirers from afar. That's pretty sure, isn't it? Justin, who have we got 16th?
We've got Errol Bullitt of Cardiff. Now, I had Bullitt a little bit higher, purely down for the fact he makes me want to fight for him. He gets me fired up. He really does. I'm not even a Cardiff fan. If Errol Bullitt was in Anthony Joshua's corner, Anthony Joshua would still be unbeaten. I can really throw that weight behind that statement completely. He gets me fired up, and I think if you've got a manager who can do that, then who knows what you can achieve.
Interesting. I mean, that's quite a start to a billing for a manager. We have 16th in our manager rankings, but here we are. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm as convinced as you. Errol Bullitt is a manager who's firmly in the I'm not sure category for me. He surpassed all expectations in guiding Cardiff to a 12th place finish last season. He 100% deserves a lot of credit for that, particularly because the two of us weren't particularly excited about them heading into last season, and they did much better than we expected. Having said that, if you took a handful of Cardiff's games last season and showed them to your average football fan, I think they'd be quite surprised that they finished in the top half. I didn't come away from many Cardiff games being impressed last season. They really grind games out. In fact, they only won 4 games last season by more than 1 goal. Only Huddersfield and Rotherham managed fewer than that last season. You add into the fact that the football's not great, very direct. There's a heavy reliance on set pieces for goals. They actually scored the fewest goals in the division from open play last season, fewer than Rotherham, which is some going. But for the whole season, they were never in danger of going down. And you can't really argue with a top half finish, particularly when many, as we were saying, including us, were expecting Cardiff to struggle last season. It's ultimately a results game, and Cardiff got more than enough results last season. Overall, though, the jury's still out for me on Errol Bullitt. What do you think, Justin?
You've mentioned a lot of stats there, and that's fair. It's backed up your point, but it's also backed up my point in that it just makes you want to fight. It just gets you fired up and makes you want to fight. I do want to make a point as well, or bring issue to something you said about open goal, goals from open play. Completely spot on. It's not good enough. That is something that has hindered me from putting him higher, is the fact that they do not create enough chances aside from set pieces. How much of that is a hangover from previous regimes at the club? Because you could say the same about Neil Harris's Cardiff, you could say the same about Steve Morrison's Cardiff, along with Mark Hudson, Sabri Lamouchi, Mick McCarthy. A lot of those teams struggle to create from open play. So how much of that is based on the personnel they've got available to them? Because they're very reliant on loan signings that did turn out to be a little bit of a disaster. Carlin Grant was pretty poor, Josh Bowler poor. The main men really that impressed with the likes of Gutos, Nat Phillips, Mark McGuinness as well. Yeah, so how much of that hindrance on going forward is down from previous managers? Yeah, well,
it's a completely fair point to make, Justin. I think the issue is with me, set piece goals. Yes, they all count no matter how they go in, but for me, set pieces just aren't a reliable source. If the vast majority of your goals are coming from set pieces, I don't think that's a reliable way of getting enough goals over the course of a season. If you take away the goals Cardiff scored from set pieces, or halve them, then they finish dramatically lower in the table, and particularly after the stat I mentioned earlier about the winning margins. So that's where things have got to be better. And yes, that's not all down to Bullitt. It's down to having better personnel. And I agree. The squad at Cardiff, I don't think is particularly great. So that's why the job that he did last season deserves even more plaudits. But I think the overall thing I would say is this: if he lost his job next season, I don't think it'd be a bad appointment by any means for other Championship sides. I won't be rushing into it, but I don't think it'd be a bad appointment. So while I've still got my reservations about him, I'm still pretty certain he's a good Championship manager.
Well, a 12th place finish would suggest that he's a good Championship manager. I think we need to see more from Cardiff before we see more from Errol Bullitt. And what I mean by that is the board actually backing him. It's the reason why he signed a new deal is because it would lead us to believe that he's been promised that he's going to get backed, and some of the signings might suggest so far that that is going to be the case. So I think it's just going to be a case of let's hold a little bit on Bullitt, see who they sign, who they bring in, and go from there. Because as I say, the recruitment is what I think has held Cardiff back in recent years on really pushing on and being a better side. It doesn't help that, again, I'll bring it up, signing Aaron Ramsey last year was probably more problematic than it was a solution, because they've got a chief creator there who's injured, who they're probably spending a lot on wage-wise, who's been injured for 2/3 of the season.
Rather conveniently, we have another manager up next who's got question marks, despite what he's achieved at Championship level. In 15th place, we have Scott Parker at Burnley. Pretty crazy, really, Justin, that we've got a manager here who's got 2 promotions to his name, yet we've ranked as the 15th manager we would like in charge of our club in the Championship.
Yeah, I had him 16th, which in my own individual list, so I surprised myself a little bit. I think the reason why I had him so high is because he has delivered 2 promotions. That's a big thing. That's massive.
It's quite a big thing, I suppose, isn't it?
But for me, they come with an asterisk each, though. Bournemouth should have competed with Fulham for the title the year they went up. They didn't, and his Fulham side should have been promoted automatically at the very least. They weren't. He takes over clubs with big budgets, and his style of play at the same time. It's possession for possession's sake. Look, a lot of people have been lambasting Gareth Southgate for playing the exact same system and exact same style of football. Scott Parker's doing exactly the same thing. And, if he was to loosen the shackles a little bit, and credit will be given. But until I see that, I can't put him any higher in my list.
I think that's fair, Justin. In fairness to Scott Parker, his Bournemouth side was sublime in the first third of their promotion season.
Yeah,
not just in terms of results, in terms of the way they were playing as well. It was great. But what followed was a lot of unconvincing performances where they were grinding out results when they had a squad stacked with talent, and we're talking stacked. His Fulham squad before was also the best in the division, but ultimately got promoted via the playoffs after a moment of magic from Joe Bryan. And then, of course, he's not had much luck in the Premier League either. Ultimately, he does have 2 promotions to his name, and if he were to do it again, this would be his most impressive, because he's working with a squad which isn't as talented as the past 2 that he's managed promotion with. And with this coming season looking quite open in terms of the promotion race, you're relying on the manager's ingenuity to push you ahead of the others. I think Burnley may fall short in that regard, just because Scott Parker, when you actually watch his teams play, they don't play like these swashbuckling sides that you'd usually associate with promotion-winning sides.
Yeah, you want a manager who's willing to take a risk, and I think you need that. Look, Vincent Kompany's Football, when they got promoted at a canter a couple of seasons ago, there was a lot of risk taken with that, whereas Scott Parker's isn't quite that. You want a little bit of excitement with the manager. I don't think Scott Parker can provide that from the evidence we've seen. It's just pass, 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 pass. He even wears grey cardigans, for fuck's sake. Inject some colour.
I need to bring up the cardigans at some point.
Inject some colour into your life, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be a success, Scott.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. How many teams have been promoted unconvincingly in the time that we've been doing this podcast, Justin? I mean, even Leicester, they were unconvincing at times last season, but by and large were convincing for the most part of the season. The 2 teams who I think of who got promoted rather unconvincingly were both Scott Parker teams. That's just how it's gone, unfortunately. So, yeah, it's going to be a very interesting season ahead with him in charge of Burnley, who I imagine will be once again spending a fair bit of money in trying to get back at the first time of asking whether Scott Parker's the man. Not convinced, I've got to say. Justin, who have we got 14th?
We've gone with Luke Williams of Swansea. I still think Luke Williams is in a period of proving himself. But I do think the limited time we've seen of him so far, it has impressed me. He won 6 of their last 13 games last season, including a very straightforward win over Cardiff, which saw Luke Williams drinking and singing with Swansea fans. So how can you not love the guy? You want a manager who will incorporate himself with the masses. And Luke Williams has done that. And that surely is enough to get him as high as he is now. Without even talking about the football.
I You know what, Justin? I think you were saying that a bit in tongue in cheek, but I actually completely agree with that. I think that's a genuinely good reason for wanting a manager at your club, someone who just gets the club. Do you know what I mean? I think that goes a long way with supporters. And when you've got a manager who's going out of his way to have a drink with the fans and cheering shots at Cardiff's demise, like he may have done last season, this is good stuff. This is what I like. And little things as well, like getting the Swansea team chef to give the team talk before the South Wales derby. This is good stuff. This is what I like. But on the pitch, I'm quite excited to see more of Luke Williams at Swansea next season. When he came in midway through last season, there wasn't a dramatic improvement by any means, but I think there's a deeper appreciation at Swansea that this is a long-term project, by and large, because he plays the Swansea way. They kind of lost that ideology when they got Michael Duff in at the start of last season, who just doesn't play the Swansea way. He tried, didn't do very well. Luke Williams does play the Swansea way and has a proven record of, doing quite well with it. We worked very closely with Russell Martin for many years, including at Swansea, in perfecting that style. And I'm looking forward to seeing Swansea trying to progress in doing it the way that the club has succeeded so well in over so many years. And look, it's going to take time. I think, well, it's the start of the project, and I hope Swansea fans appreciate that is the start of the project. And I think they do, from the ones that I speak to. A lot of them say that this is the start of the project, and it is going to take time. So it's going to be a season where Swansea probably don't pull up many trees, but as long as they keep faith in Luke Williams and give him time, I think he'll work wonders in the long term.
He's also the winner in our list of who the best bowled manager is in the division.
Is he really?
Yes, because he's one of only 2 full boldies in the league, ahead of Paul Warne. So quite a damning stat that we are limited on what we've got in terms of bowled managers. But
not enough
Luke
boldies.
Williams takes not enough boldies, but Luke Williams takes the crown, literally. I can't really add too much to that. I didn't know what he said. I just wanted to make that point.
Okay. Great. I'm glad my point was really fascinating, keeping you in touch with the show. Yeah, not enough boldies in the Championship. That's the summary of Luke Williams for us. Justin, we'll do one more before we'll call quits on this part of the 2 episodes. Who have we got in 13th?
We've got Stephen Schumacher of Stoke. I feel like his stock's dropped a little bit from when he came up with Plymouth.
Do you want me to interrupt you there, Justin, and tell you why you probably think that? Because he's a bit of a funny one. I had a look at last year's list, Justin. We had him 6th in our list, and now we've got him 13th. It's the Stoke City effect for you, isn't it? But ultimately, he did marvellously well in getting Plymouth promoted, didn't he? And the job he subsequently did afterwards in the Championship was great. I think Plymouth would have finished mid-table if he stayed there. But then he left for Stoke, and at various times it seemed like a decision he may live to regret. At one point, it genuinely looked like he may get sacked after just 2 months in the job when he lost 6 games in 7. He eventually kept them up after several moments where you thought they could be going down here. Mm-hmm. So he kept them up. That's good. Stoke were in quite a perilous position when he got the job, so he managed to shore things up in that regard. I still think he's a good manager. His career choices, I've got question marks over though, Justin.
I mean, there'll probably be Stoke fans listening to this and going, "What's wrong with my football club?" And it's a fair question to make because it might feel like a personal dig, but it isn't. Stoke have been a bit of a nightmare football club for a long time, and the likes of Nathan Jones, his stock fell dramatically after we left Stoke. He had to go back to a Luton who were, on the verge of being relegated to the Championship. History could have been a very different thing for them. Relegated to League One. History could have been a very different. They could be in a very different position now if that had happened. But he went and rekindled his quality. Similarly with Michael O'Neill, left Stoke, he's now back at Northern Ireland. So Alex Neil's not got a job yet. Stock falls after Stoke City, mainly because Stoke City as a football club just don't get things right up above, which means their managers that they employ they don't have the right tools or the right environment to really thrive in. I like Schumacher a lot. I really do. I really, really do like him a lot, and I want to see him succeed at Stoke. Form from March was positive, lost just 3 games in 12. But the Plymouth spell is the real carrier here for putting him as high up in this list, because if it was based on his Stoke spell, it'd probably be a lot lower. There is reason to be positive, as I say. That form at the latter end of the last few games of the previous season is a big one, and maybe a settled summer could do it. But we've said this a lot with previous managers, they've all failed. Schumacher could be another one. Yeah. If he does well, he'll be much higher on this list next season.
Bloody hell, 100%.
but as I say, his stock has fallen.
Yeah, it has, and it's interesting what you say there, Justin, about Stoke fans maybe asking what's wrong with my club. There's nothing wrong with Stoke City as a football club, but what Schumacher has done is he's gone from a very comfortable job at Plymouth where the expectations are low. It was a club on the up, excellent recruitment. It was a great place to raise your profile as a manager, wasn't it? And that's what Schumacher did. Now he's at Stoke, where the expectations are much higher. It's a club that's not been going anywhere for a long time. The recruitment's been dreadful for years, and it's also been a graveyard for many managers previously, as you just mentioned. Essentially the exact opposite of what he had at Plymouth, and that's why I'm sceptical he could be the man who finally makes things happen at Stoke. I would be interested to know what Stoke fans truly feel about him. Do they also have that scepticism, or do they think given time he could be a success? And I imagine the general consensus, Justin, is somewhere in between.
You'll always get fans who are probably a little bit more cynical because of what they've been through over the past few years, and you always get the fans that will see a few signings come in and just get carried away. And either is absolutely fine. But in terms of measuring measure as to who we want in charge of our football club, you can only base it on what they've done in previous months, in previous jobs, and unfortunately, since January or since December when Schumacher was appointed, it's not been fantastic. He's had to really sacrifice a lot of what made him a great manager. Is that bold attacking style that we saw Plymouth really go to town with in that first half of the Championship season last season, and that's what got them promoted to the Championship from League One. We've not seen that, so if he can get that going, then brilliant. Everyone's onto something positive here, but it's a big but. It's a huge but. Massive.
It's a huge
massive but.
It's a massive Nicki Minaj but, is what it is. The thing is, we've talked a lot about stock in this episode. If I was... What's someone called who recommends on stock? What are they called?
A stockbroker.
Stockbroker. If I was a stockbroker and I'm talking about Steven Schumacher, then you've kind of got your finger hovering over the sell button.
You do,
right now.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy.
I'm not recommending sell, but I would say just have that button ready, just in case. But there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That's been 24-12 in our manager rankings of all the managers in the Championship based on how much we would want them at our club. If your manager hasn't been named yet, then congratulations, they're in the top 12. But whereabouts? All will be revealed on Monday, ladies and gentlemen, where we do part 2 of this list and go from 12 to 1. In ranking all the managers in the Championship based on how much we would want them at our club. This has been the Second Tier Podcast. We'll be back again on Monday. I've been Ryan Dilks.
I've been Justin Peach.
And a big thank you for listening.